We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started.
What am I doing here? I'm putting out the message for peace and to have people think about it, think about peace, and think about what they might do to bring peace to them, just generally to the world, even at a, family level, local level, country level. And I'm hoping that someday the troops will come back and we won't have to support a war that, seems endless right now. Yeah.
We first started coming in October 2001. And that was at a time when Canada had decided to support the humanitarian bombing of Afghanistan. And a lot of us thought that was completely crazy. In fact, in a few weeks before, there were a couple of hundred people here every week in protest. We're the ones who kind of were left over from the big group. We were the ones who still felt like just taking a stand was important. So over the years, we call it a spontaneous vigil. We aren't organized. We don't have meetings, but we still come because we help support each other in recognizing that what we hear in the news every day is completely skewed to one viewpoint, and we go home feeling a lot better, having spoken to many people of the public who know that war is wrong and very archaic for this century. All our children are taught in school conflict resolution, but our politicians and leaders don't seem to think that's the first technological tool to choose. They feel war is still the technology of choice.
Do you think that there's an alternative to armed conflict?
Yes, I think that Obama has been talking about the alternative, which is engaging the enemy, engaging people that you don't agree with their culture or their religion or, the way they talk or anything, but to have an engagement and keep the communication going. And to me, that would be the alternative as well. It's going to take a long time because it hasn't been done that way, and a lot of people don't believe that, it's possible.
Love surround you everywhere, everywhere.
I had known Martin Luther King and his wife for some time, actually through the peace and civil rights activities. But I went as a representative of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom at that time. And said, here we are. Another friend was with us and said, well, here we are, and what do you want us to do? And what they decided they wanted us to do was to give us a nice car, not flashy, but a nice car. And I was a safe person driving around the neighborhood, doing errands, going to the next encampment, picking up people who needed picking up, because I looked like a good white housewife, and a middle-class housewife. So it's probably safer than I could have been in any other way. And it was a useful service. I took messages, said who needed what. They need more something or other here. There's somebody needs a doctor there, that kind of thing. So I was kept busy, and it was very interesting being behind the scenes and knowing that I was being helpful. Yeah.
It's common knowledge that Martin Luther King believed in nonviolence. How do you think the use of nonviolence helped the civil rights movement?
Well, as a Quaker, I also believe in nonviolence, and I think that first of all, I think it's the right way to behave. But in addition to that, I think it's strategically a good way to behave in situations like that, to show that you're no physical threat see, here I am. I'm unarmed. I'm driving a car around the countryside. And it actually, I think, deflected a lot of antagonism that there might have been, because we obviously weren't going to do anything. We were going to upset the whole scheme of things, but we weren't going to do anything physically to harm anyone. And so that made it a different kind of situation.
I find it outrageous that we are spending enormous amounts of money on war when there are obvious signs of the need for that money to be spent on local issues and issues related to settling disputes, and this is really what primarily motivates me. I've just and the horrible death that doesn't need to take place, and Afghanistan currently is in no better shape. They're having terrible times over there. It's time we withdrew our troops to protect them, which is what my sign is all about. Yeah. So that's my primary reason, and I find this a very supportive group, though we differ on many issues. We're all agreed on the anti-war aspect.
Right now, Canada is at war in Afghanistan. What are your thoughts about that armed intervention?
I don't think it's the way to go. I don't think in the long run it ever helps to go into a situation like that with armed intervention. I just think that in any case you have to step back and say, what can we do to be helpful in this situation in a nonviolent way? I'm quite convinced that violence arouses violence, and we're always better off if we can find a way to solve the situation. To do that, you have to get in to some of the nitty-gritty of what's causing the situation, who is looking to benefit from that alliance, which I have some suspicions about, that we're not there out of the goodness of our hearts. And what shall I say? A nonviolent intervention takes as much or more planning. You don't just sit back and say, no, I'm not going to fight. You say, what are the ways? What are the issues? How can we help to change this without violence? How can we make it? And you have to be prepared to run the same kind of risks that you would if it were a violent. You can't sit back and say, well, I'm going to be nonviolent and that's going to be safe, because it won't necessarily. If you're in a situation that generally is arousing passions on one side or another, some people are going to use violence.
One of the things I was going to tell you was this particular sign says, "Stop the next war, tell the truth about this one." And I think that's one of the things that we've all learned in the decades of age we are now, is that whatever reasons people are given for what the war begins as, it's really always something about something else, and history shows that. And the tragedy of that is those who enlist, those who voluntarily go because they think, there's certain reasons why they must go. And they sign up for a tour or 2 tours, or in the States they're drafted. I mean, they say there's not a draft, but of course there's the poverty draft. The only way you're going to get medical coverage or get advanced education is if you go in the Army, is what they're led to believe, and they're taught that from high school, and the tragedy is the reasons that they're given for the wars taking place are never the reasons that history says it's about. But eventually the truth comes out, because some people do know the truth, and they're the businesses that are making the bucks off of what it's all about. They're closer to knowing the reality than anybody else.